Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sunshine Gardening Podcast. I'm Kristen Hildebrand, your host. Today, we're excited to share a previously recorded session from our exciting Home Lawn Improvement series. It was actually recorded earlier this month on September the 9th of 2024. In this recording, we had the privilege of hosting Kenneth Clayton, an Extension Associate in the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences at the University of Kentucky. He shared invaluable insights into lawn establishment and renovation for cool season grasses in the Kentucky lawn, which is particularly relevant as we enter the fall season. This knowledge, which we believe is a powerful tool in your gardening arsenal, will empower you to enhance your lawn's appearance during this time of year. So, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation.
Welcome to the Sunshine Gardening Podcast. This gardening show will equip and inspire avid gardeners with tips and tricks to help them navigate the gardening world. The show will also highlight specific growing requirements for seasonal plants, so the sun will shine brighter over their Kentucky garden. And now, here's that ray of sunshine, garden enthusiast and horticulture extension agent, Kristen Hildebrand, with the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service.
So when we think about lawn establishment, the first thing we should consider is, should I renovate my lawn? And so this can be a somewhat subjective decision, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. And so generally, what I'm going to recommend for folks is, if you have 50% or more of undesirable turf in your lawn, you might want to consider renovating it. And this is going to be easier to decide year after year, especially if your lawn looks really good in the spring, but every summer it struggles. Every fall you're reseeding. It's likely you need to renovate and think about improving that lawn. So you can see here in the picture on the right, there is green grass in there, but we're also dealing with a few broadleaf weeds here, as well as a few grassy weeds here. And this lawn is really almost 50% some Kentucky bluegrass and fine fescues. And the only really green grass here is the tall fescue. It hasn't received any irrigation. So it looks really sparse. You know, if we do get some rains coming up here and the cooler temperatures, a lot of that bluegrass will bounce back. But for most of the summer, it's going to be kind of wilted and weak looking, like we see here in the picture, which is a good indicator to me that it likely needs to be renovated with improved species, improved grass varieties in it. Other reasons you might consider renovating your lawn is you're going to change from one grass species to another. If it is all Kentucky bluegrass and you want to switch it to a turf type tall fescue, that's a good time to renovate the lawn. If you have very difficult to control weeds, so weeds such as ground ivy and wild violet, and some of these grassy weeds where we don't have really great selective herbicides for those, and you can't remove them from your current lawn, it's likely a good time to do a renovation on your lawn to completely kill those weeds out and to start from fresh there. Also, increasing the uniformity of the lawn. So really one of the main factors, whether you realize it or not, if you look at a lawn and you think, wow, that looks really good, is because it's a uniform lawn. So that is usually the same species, but grasses that look similar to one another and are a uniform stand across the lawn are going to provide a much better aesthetic value to you. So even if you had 100% crabgrass and you kept it mowed down where you didn't see the seed heads, driving by, it would probably look pretty good. But if you have 10, 12, 15 crabgrass plants popped up in the middle of an otherwise beautiful tall fescue lawn, that's going to stand out like a sore thumb, and that's going to hurt the aesthetic value of it. So renovating the lawn gives you an opportunity to increase that uniformity. Also increase the property value. Having a wonderful landscape is probably one of the best ways that you could increase the resale value of your home. And so when it comes to making these decisions, one thing to take into consideration is maybe try your backyard first. Try a small area. So we'll cover a lot tonight, but when you do your lawn, you're inevitably going to learn something. So maybe try to tackle the backyard first and learn from that experience, and then do the front yard the following year. So if you decide, yes, I do want to renovate my lawn, the next question is, when should I renovate my lawn? So here's just a little chart. The answer is, in the state of Kentucky, almost always the fall. I know that's not always possible. And for warm season grasses, we don't typically want to do that in the fall. But the reason we recommend renovating your lawn in the fall is because it's a time when the soil temperatures are still warm. So we're going to get quick germination of that grass seed. And in the spring, when we're coming out of the winter, we're starting to get some warm ambient temperatures, but it takes a while for those soil temperatures to warm up. So we're going to get slow germination with that. Also, when we renovate our lawns in the fall, it gives 2 cool periods before we hit the heat stress of Kentucky summers, which a lot of us are seeing and experiencing our lawns right now, is that drought and heat stress there. So those new seedlings, very, very short roots, very weak, and they need to be babied. So if we can plant those grasses in the fall, right now the days are getting shorter, the heat stress is being reduced each and every day as we get into the cooler periods of the fall. And then it's also going to have that spring period to continue to grow and be strengthened by the spring rains before we get that heat and drought stress of our hot summers here. So if we plant our grasses in the spring, we're only going to have that one cool period before it has to handle the heat stress of the summer, which leads to the next problem. If you do not have a full dense lawn, you're going to have increased grassy weed problems. So things like our foxtails, our crabgrasses, and our goosegrasses are going to be a much bigger problem with spring establishment of grasses versus the fall. Especially after we have that first frost, we don't have to worry about any of those annual warm season grassy weeds. And so the only thing growing is going to be the good, healthy grass that you planted. So that's another benefit of planting in the fall. So like Kristen said at the beginning, the fall is really the best time to think about our lawn care calendar. And when we go in the spring and all of the big box stores, all of the farm and garden stores are doing their marketing, and we really think about taking care of our lawn, that is a good time, but it's really the second best time. We want to think of the fall first of all. So we've decided to renovate our lawn. We've thought about when we should renovate our lawn. The next question is, do you need to do traditional establishment versus just a renovation? And so when I talk about traditional establishment, I'm talking about using tillage here. So essentially, we are killing all that grass and we're tilling that ground up to where we just have dirt there. Versus a renovation is a no-till. So we are going to reduce the competition from the existing grass, whether that be killing it, whether that be scalping it, but we're going to leave that grass there and we're not going to use any form of tillage. So this no-till, we'll talk about more later in the presentation, but that's typically what we're going to recommend. But there are several reasons why one would choose to do a traditional establishment. And so things like, do you need to improve the soil? Do you need to improve your drainage? Are you wanting to do things like install an irrigation system? Did you have new plumbing put in through the yard? Any kind of major disruptions into your lawn that already you need to dig it up for? It may be a good time to use that to reestablish your lawn from fresh there. Also, of course, if you're coming into a new development that doesn't have the lawn there, you're going to be establishing it that traditional way. So thinking about that traditional establishment methods, we spend a lot of time and effort into providing the best soils for our gardens. So when we think about our lawns, we often see new construction and rocks and debris from the construction are just buried under a couple inches of dirt. And then we sow the grass seed right on there. And then we wonder, why is our lawn struggling? So doing a traditional establishment method is going to allow you to really think about improving those soils, improving the drainage that you have there, and making overall improvements to the foundation of what your lawn's going to be growing on for years and years to come. So when we talk about traditional establishment of the lawn, we want to think about improving those soils. How do we know what our soils need? And of course, the best way to do that is to take a soil report. To get a soil report from the University of Kentucky, drop off that sample at your local extension office there. And so when we get a report back, this is a typical report that you'll see. But the main thing that I want you to think about before you sow that new grass and getting that soil report is looking at that pH. So if you're, really with lawns, we have a big flexibility. It's not like growing certain crops like blueberries that really need acidic soil or other crops that really need a more neutral soil. So we can grow really healthy grass from a wide range of pHs, everywhere from 5 up to 8. I've seen perfectly healthy grass growing on them. But now is the time, as you're doing this establishment, to improve that. So if your soil test comes back with a very low pH, it's a great time to incorporate some lime into that soil. For some odd reason, it was extremely high pH. It's a time that you could incorporate some sulfur or other amendments to the lawn. So beyond that, of course, we're not going to get a nitrogen report back from that. There's not a good test for that. We have phosphorus and potassium here, but we really want to wait until after our grass emerges to apply those fertilizers. And by doing that, we're going to reduce any risk of runoff or leaking from those fertilizers before the grass actually germinates and has the chance to use it. So it's not the worst idea, but it just reduces the risk when you have rain and things coming to apply that fertilizer after it's established. So beforehand, we're really thinking about adjusting that pH and then adding things like compost, topsoil, to where you have a really healthy, good depth to a good soil to your lawn to grow on, thinking just like you would for a raised bed almost. So kind of the first step in that establishment, if you're not coming into a new development that the grading has already been done, I'm thinking if you already have grass there, here's where you're going to start. And that's killing the existing vegetation with a non-selective herbicide. So this sounds very simple, and it really is. It's not rocket science, but something like glyphosate is a great option here. But there are a few tips that I wanted to point out when applying Roundup or glyphosate onto your lawn is to be very cautious, especially if you get a windy day. You do not want to be out applying this. It's extremely important to know that this product is going to kill all of the vegetation it touches, apart from probably horseweed and a few broadleaf weeds like that. But hopefully you don't have those in your lawn. So with this, we need to be careful we're not spraying it on our own gardens and ornamental plants, as well as our neighbor's yard. So first thing I would do is recommend to buy a spray indicator dye when you buy your glyphosate. And these are usually blue or green dyes that are going to help you see where you're spraying. So that's really important to make sure that you're not getting much drift. And then also secondarily is to be aware of your water carrier volume. So this was a research plot that we had out at our field days this year. And you can think, man, I really, really want to kill this grass. So I'm going to go a super high rate. I want to make one application. I don't want to do this again. And you can see here with a backpack sprayer, if you were going all the way up to 1 gallon of glyphosate per acre with a low carrier volume of 20 gallons per acre, you're going to see really bad drift there. So you can see the 2 orange dots there at the bottom. That's where they stop spraying. And you can see all of the runoff and drift from that glyphosate in areas where they didn't want it. So here's another picture here. The importance of the carrier volume. You can see here that the low carrier volume is actually going to give you a decent kill rate, but you don't need to use a gallon per acre to get the kill there. So when you went down to 2 quarts or a quart per acre rather, you can see you got really good kill there, but you didn't have the drift issues. So when you're going a very, very high concentration, even just the smallest bit of molecules that float away are going to kill the grass where you don't want to kill it. So you can see here on the right that at a high water carrier volume, so it's the same amount of glyphosate, but the water went up from 20 gallons per acre all the way up to 90 gallons per acre. And when you go that high of a rate, you're going to see very weak kill. So take that into consideration. Somewhere between 20 to 40 gallons per acre is probably an ideal application water carrier volume. So be aware, read your label, apply the proper amount of glyphosate, but also be aware of that water carrier volume. So things that you can take advantage of when you're renovating that lawn is to install drainage. This is a great opportunity to take care of some of those waterlogging issues, which may be causing problems in your lawn. So if we get some of this rain this coming week, knock on wood, go out there and see, do you have areas that are puddling? Do you have areas that hold water where the grass is performing poorly? And use the renovation time as an opportunity to install drainage in those areas. So also you can use, when you're tilling, it's a great opportunity to incorporate soil amendments, so compost, topsoil. But once you have killed that sod, like we showed in the last picture with the non-selective, you may have to come back, say 7 days later, and make another application, depending on the weeds present there, if you don't get a good kill on those. But what we want to do then is we don't need to remove that material. We can take a rototiller and till that into the soil. All that organic material from that dead lawn that you killed is going to improve the soils of that lawn there. So it's a good time to help with compact soils. So you can till that up, loosen the soils up there, add those soil amendments, and also take care of installing drainage and things like underground irrigation systems. So again, first step is killing the lawn. Second step, tilling and installing any underground drainage or amendments that you need to apply. Once you have tilled the lawn, we want to put a final grade on it. Ideally here, like this picture here, you can see it is a very smooth, no big clumps, no rocks, and it is running away from the house. So after you have tilled it, after you have smoothed it out, it's a good idea to run some irrigation or let a couple rainfalls come down on it. And that's really going to help that dirt to settle down, and go out and check for puddling. So before you go ahead and throw the seed down, make sure you have a really good base there where it's draining. All that water is running off the way that it should, and you're not going to have low areas with dead grass potentially in the future. So now at this point, all the hard work is done and you're ready to lay your sod or sow your seed. So that is your traditional renovation steps, all the way up to laying the sod or sowing the seed. But we really prefer no-till renovation whenever possible. And some benefits of the no-till renovation are it's going to reduce your chances of soil erosion. As that picture showed you there before, it was a really pretty, beautiful final grade on that yard, but it just takes a big gully washer downpour and you're going to be right back there pushing that soil back up again. So with a no-till renovation, leaving that sod on the ground, you're going to help reduce the chances of soil erosion. And it's a whole lot less messy and less labor intensive. So you are not having to till, you're not having to use extra equipment. And so that's going to help prevent your labor there. And it also is going to reduce weed competition from the seed bank. So every time we till that ground up, there is seed from weeds over the years that is there, and you bring that to the surface and it germinates. So by leaving the sod on the top there and then just putting slits into it, you're going to reduce the weed competition. And also that dead sod on top is going to help hold moisture into the ground during establishment. So when it comes to no-till renovation, we basically are going to start the same way we do with the traditional method. We're going to spray a non-selective herbicide such as glyphosate, or even if you're doing really small areas, you can use plastic, anything to smother that grass and kill it. But even in this picture here, you can see there's a few green spots there. So after you spray it, most of the labels will say something about waiting approximately 7 days. I mean, that's going to allow peak weed control. So at that 7-day point, all of that glyphosate is going to be absorbed into the weeds, into the grass, about as much as it's going to. And so at that point, you're going to see what's dying, what's not. And if you need to, you may need to go back and make a second application somewhere to a week to 2 weeks later to help remove the rest of those weeds. But if it's just a few spots, you can get down and cut those out by hand, mechanically remove them, or just scalp them down with the lawnmower. So once you have a good kill on that lawn, and I would say this picture here is a really good kill. They didn't spray the bushes next to it, but they killed the lawn there. You want to go in with your lawnmower and scalp that material down. And this is going to make it much easier when you bring in your power seeder to seed these areas. That's going to help you to get good soil to seed contact when you plant your seed. So if you got a lawn that's 3-4 inches tall and you spray it down, it's going to be just laying there, mat it down. So lower that mower down as low as you can without cutting into the dirt, and then come back behind that and just spread out or remove any large piles of debris. So any clumps there that would inhibit your seed from getting good contact with the soil, go ahead and spread those out and get the lawn scalped down as low as you can. After this point, you've got it sprayed out, you've got dead grass, you've got it scalped down as low as you can. You might want to consider aerifying the lawn. And so we typically think about aerifying healthy lawns, but a good way to tell if you need to aerify is by using the knife test. So you can see here the picture on the right. You want to just take any old pocket knife, and this is just a good rule of thumb, is push it down in the ground just a little bit. You don't want to cut yourself, but just using your thumb and the weight of your thumb, if you can push the pocket knife down into the soil, you're probably not going to benefit from aerification. If you're pushing the weight of your thumb down on that knife and you cannot get it to go in the soil, or you can't get it to go deeper, a half an inch or an inch, then you're probably going to benefit from aerification. And the main benefits of aerification are relieving compaction. So you still are going to leave that dead grass on top of there, but by aerifying, you're going to help relieve the compaction. And it's a way to, if you want it to at this point, to spread a little topsoil or compost and work that into the aerification holes. Also, by aerifying, all those holes are going to give good channels for the seed to fall down into as well. So consider aerification at this point. If you aerify or if you don't aerify, either way at this point, you're now ready. You've got a good complete kill on the lawn. You've scalped it down to where there's not much material there. Spread out any debris so it's all even. And now you can rent a power seeder or a dethatcher from your local equipment dealer there. And basically, here's an example of one on the right here. And you can see the picture of the blades there. This has blades that spin, and you can usually adjust the height on these. And what that's going to do is to give you really good channels that your seed can fall down into. So if you just spread your seed on top, it's possible it's going to germinate, but if it's not germinated down in the soil, it's going to die very quickly without continual water. So these knives on these power seeders or dethatchers are going to actually rip down through that dead grass, down through that top layer of thatch on the soil, and allow that seed to fall down and actually come in contact with the soil. So these seed boxes on the front, if you're experienced with these, if you've used them quite a bit, you can play around with that calibration on that. But if you're not comfortable and you don't want to have a bunch of extra seed or run out of seed, worse when you're seeding your lawn, you may consider taking the power seeder across the lawn multiple directions to open up those channels. And then you can use just a broadcast, regular rotary lawn spreader to spread that seed on top. But with these seeders, we want to go a minimum in 2 directions. And so what that's going to do is to help prevent your new grass from popping up like rows of corn. We want it to be more uniform than that. We want it to look like it was just spread across the whole lawn. So when you seed, we want to figure out that total rate of seed that you want to apply, and at a minimum, apply that in 2 directions. So you're going to half that to get your total rate going in two directions. And that's going to give you a much more uniform coverage at the end of all of this preparation. So at this point, you have done all the hard work now, and it's time to plant your seed. So with planting your seed, I think maybe the most important decision that a turf manager can make, home lawn renovation decisions, is what type of grass should I plant? And being that we are in the transition zone in Kentucky, that means that we have very hot summers and cold winters. So it does not make the decision very easy for us. If you were in Florida, it's very simple. There's a few good warm season grasses you could choose. If you were up in Minnesota, we would say choose a good Kentucky bluegrass. It's a no-brainer. But being in Kentucky, we can grow a lot of these grasses, but many of them are going to struggle at different times of the year. So some of our choices here, and I think at the end of the day, I'm going to point you towards turf type tall fescue, but I wanted to walk through a few of these just to show you what the options are and why some of them may be better than others to grow in the state of Kentucky. So this is perennial ryegrass here. This is actually a soccer pitch, Lynn Family Stadium in Louisville, where they have Bermuda grass, but they overseed it with perennial ryegrass every fall. And it looks beautiful and gorgeous. And so you may think, wow, I would love for my lawn to look like that. And it may look like that for a short period of time. Perennial ryegrass is a very shiny, dark green grass, and it can withstand very low mowing heights, say around a half an inch or a little bit lower. So it's well suited for overseeding Bermuda grass sports fields to have a good playing surface to help hold up during those late fall and winter months when sports are being played on it. And one of the things that really perennial ryegrass stands out at is its very fast germination. So soil temperatures like they are now, if you were to go out and plant this grass and keep it watered, you may see germination in as little as 3 days. So all of those things are the pros about perennial ryegrass, but it is extremely disease susceptible. So it has been grown on golf course fairways across the state for many, many years, and there are only a handful of golf courses still growing it because it is a constant battle to keep this grass alive. It requires huge inputs of fungicides and watering during the summer. Some of our pathologists, Dr. Vincelli at UK, did a lot of work on this grass back in the day on trying to keep it alive, and it is one that they love because it is going to get quite a bit of disease. It also has a low heat and drought tolerance, and for these reasons, it often dies in the summer in Kentucky. So I would highly recommend when renovating your lawn to check those seed bags and make sure that you're not getting any perennial or annual ryegrass in those bags. Another option is fine fescues in the state of Kentucky. And this is actually part of my backyard in which my 4 kids run around, and I have done nothing to it. No fertilizer, no irrigation or anything, but we have a beautiful shade tree back there. So the lawn suffers for that reason. And so fine fescues are often sold in mixes which are advertised as shade mixes. And it's true, fine fescues do better than other grasses in the shade. But you can see with no irrigation, these fine fescues are going to go dormant. So although they will survive, they're going to turn brown in the summer. And it's a clump type grass. So it's going to form really bumpy clumps in the lawn unless it's seeded very densely, mowed very lowly. And it is really probably the lower limits in Kentucky of its range of where it can do really well. So it'll look really pretty in the spring with sufficient rainfall, but during the summer, it's going to kind of lay over, go dormant, and form these bumpy clumps in your lawn, and it's not going to be competitive with other weeds. So really, for that reason, we do not recommend fine fescues unless you're willing to deal with that look most of the year. So it is not great for the Kentucky summers. Kentucky bluegrass. We live in the bluegrass state. So we may think, yeah, that's the grass I want. That's the one that our state's named after. We should plant it. And it is a beautiful grass. This is actually the softball field on campus here. And this is Mountain View Seed 365 sod that they just laid, I guess, within the past 2 weeks here. And it looks beautiful up there. So benefit of Kentucky bluegrass is that it has rhizomes, meaning it has underground stems that creep. So you'll often see bluegrass sometimes pop up in your landscape beds. You'll see it spreading. So it helps if you're dealing with athletic situations where you do get wear and tear, it will repair itself. But in the heat of Kentucky, you will require supplemental irrigation to maintain that color. And it's also very prone to diseases as well. I mean, because of that growth habit of it, that rhizomes, the underground stems, thatch can be a problem with Kentucky bluegrass. So I typically do not recommend Kentucky bluegrass for the home lawn. It's a little bit better suited for athletic situations. Although that being said, some of the cultivars that I have seen available here in Kentucky that I've seen do really well are this Mountain View Seed 365 SS and Baron Bruggs HGT bluegrass have done really well on sports fields, on golf courses, and in the home lawn situation. And they are available as sod here locally in the state. So while it's not the top choice, it is a possibility, but it's very cultivar dependent, and it is going to require higher inputs. So more fertility than a tall fescue would. It's going to require more irrigation than a tall fescue would. And I think the farther southwest in the state we move, it's going to be more and more difficult to maintain this at a high level. So across the state, generally from east to west, north to south, the one grass that fits everywhere is going to be that turf type tall fescue. It is one that has excellent heat and drought tolerance. If you remember the first picture of that lawn that needed renovated, really the only plants that were still green were those tall fescue plants. It has moderate shade tolerance. And in fact, some studies from Ohio State showed that it performed better than fine fescues did. Another thing is that it does not build up thatch. And there are varieties available that are much better than Kentucky 31. So when we say turf type tall fescues, you want to make sure that the seed that you're buying is not marketed towards forages, towards pastures, and avoid Kentucky 31. It is a much broader leaf blade, and it's not as drought tolerant as some of these newer turf type tall fescues are. So really the only downsides of turf type tall fescue are it's susceptible to brown patch, which the grass typically will outgrow if it's a dense, healthy stand. And it's also a bunch type grass with slow lateral spread. So we're going to overcome that fact of it being a bunch type grass by planting it densely and promoting it with some fertilizer as we get that established. But overall, when folks ask what grass should I choose in the state of Kentucky, I'm going to recommend a turf type tall fescue. But as an aside, we'll say warm season grasses are an option, especially if you're in zone 7 plus, and even in zone 6 plus. We have had Bermuda grass and zoysia grass grown in the state of Kentucky for many, many years now. And with the breeding programs out of the universities, there's new improved varieties available. And the main limiting factor to many of these are going to be the winter kill. So you might not have any kill for a couple years, but if we get a really cold spell, there's always potential with winter kill for these. So the main lawn species that we would use in the state are Bermuda grass and zoysia grass. And really the differences between those is that zoysia is much slower growing. It's not going to creep across your driveway and into your landscape beds as fast as Bermuda grass would. And it is more cold tolerant, generally speaking, than Bermuda grass is. So largely for across the state, for the home lawn, we would recommend zoysia grass. The downside is that establishment is typically more expensive with this, and Bermuda grass establishes much quicker. But in the fall, and it's not the best time. So if you are thinking about warm season grasses, we typically want to establish those in the late spring to the early summer. Just here's a picture of the current 2023 USDA hardiness map. So we can see Bowling Green there in the 7A zone. So it's going to do well with zoysia or Bermuda grass. And even as we get down to parts of Simpson, Allen County, farther western Kentucky as well, we're on into the 7B zone there. So it may be that we start considering more and more warm season grasses moving forward. And this is a fun picture. Here is a friend of mine's lawn. He's in Portsmouth, Ohio, and he inherited a zoysia grass lawn there. Been there for a very long time, presumably. And it has Virginia spring beauties that pop up all over it in the spring. So while the zoysia grass goes dormant in the spring, he has a beautiful lawn full of flowers. And about the time the temperatures heat up and the flowers start to fade is when that grass starts to green up and he starts to mow. And so he doesn't have to mow those flowers off, and it's a really showy lawn for the springtime while that grass is dormant. Continuing on establishment and thinking about establishing warm season grasses specifically, we want to think about vegetative establishment for those. And our options are, and I should say, not just warm season grasses for sod especially, but sod has benefits in that we cover the ground immediately. The best thing is if you have risk of erosion, if you're on hillsides where you're worried about things washing away and you need a quick establishment, although sod is more expensive than seed, it's probably your best bet to get something growing very quickly. Turf type tall fescue sod is available, but it will be often mixed with Kentucky bluegrass because we talked about it has those rhizomes, and that's going to help hold that sod together so that you can handle it without it crumbling apart. When it comes to sod, it's really pretty simple. Establishment, green side up. We want to push those sod pieces very tight together, and we want to stagger the seams. So you can see here the way it's staggered, stair-stepped going up here. And what that's going to do is to prevent washouts from water running through those seams when we get rains during the establishment. So sod, we can do this really anytime that the ground is not frozen. If the sod farm can cut it, you can lay that sod. But if you do it late in the winter, you still have to remember it's got very short roots. It's not yet fully established, and just be concerned about desiccation and it drying out. Make sure that you are able to get water onto it. Sprigs are another vegetative option. Sprigs are going to be available with our Bermuda and zoysia grass, and sprigs are stolons, so above ground stems and rhizomes that spread across a lawn. And so essentially this is ground up Bermuda grass and zoysia grass that you would then prepare the lawn just like you would for seeding, but you're going to spread that material out, and then you're going to either lightly cover it with some topsoil or roll that to smooth it down to get good sprig to soil contact. Another way to vegetatively establish some warm season grasses is by using plugs. You can actually buy trays of plugs offline, or you can buy sod. So sometimes the sod can be very expensive. You can plant some sod and then come back after it is rooted in and established and pull plugs from that to spread across the rest of your lawn. So buying grass seed. This is really, I would emphasize here that you don't want to skimp here. We spent some money on renovation. We spent some money on airifying, renting the equipment. What we don't want to do is to buy cheap seed that has weeds in it and spread that seed across our lawn. So there are university trials, in-depth trials that you can research. You can talk to myself, local extension agents, talk to others that you know have planted seed and had success, and choose a grass seed variety that's really good. And one way you can do that is by looking at the seed tags. You can see here on this bag on the left, there is a blue seed tag, and that means that it is certified seed. That means that what they say is in the bag has been certified that it is in the bag. And when we look at the seed tags, we want to be sure here what you want to look at is what's in the bag. So if you want tall fescue, that's what you want to be in there. You can see the tag here also has a hard fescue in it, which is a type of a fine fescue. So if you don't want fine fescues, then you don't want to buy a seed that has that in there. The bag on the left here is all Kentucky bluegrass. So you know you're getting a straight Kentucky bluegrass. But then beyond that, you really want to look at the weed seed and the inert matter. Some of the bags that you can go into, the stores now and flip it over, and it might have up to 50% inert matter if they're a mulch covered seed. So be aware of how much seed you're getting in there. And when we talk about seeding the lawns, here our typical seeding rate is 6 pounds of turf type tall fescue per 1,000 square feet. So a much denser, higher rate than, say, you would for a pasture. And you may even go up to 8 to 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet to really get improved coverage. But when we say that, we're looking at pure live seed there. And I won't try to do too much math here live. I don't want to embarrass myself with that. But this seed tag here is really straightforward. It contains one variety, which is Falcon 4 tall fescue, and it has 99.71% pure seed with a 90% germination. So when you're calculating pure live seed, it is the percent seed purity, which is 99 here, multiplied by the percent seed germination. So in this case, we take 99% times 90 and 0.9, and we get 0.89. And if you remember from the last slide, we wanted 6 pounds per 1,000 square feet of tall fescue. So we divide 6 by 0.89. And so for every 6 pounds that we want, we actually need to apply 6.7 pounds of this specific seed here. So if this pure seed rate was around 50%, we would need approximately 12 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet to get a 6 pound pure live seed rate. Determining the size of your lawn, a good way to do that is using Google Earth. And when you go into Google Earth program, you can click the tools icon, you can click ruler and select polygon. And then that's going to allow you to select the perimeter of your lawn. This is the Spencer County Cooperative Extension Office. And if we wanted to see that area there, we can click around that lawn, and it's going to tell us that it's approximately 7,600 square feet. Or if you enjoy geometry, you can feel free to go out and measure your lawn that way. But that's a good, quick way to determine how much seed that you need for your lawn. So you've done the hard work, you've prepped, you've done the research, bought the seed, and you have planted it, going in multiple directions. Now it's time to, what do I do after I plant the grass seed? So moisture management is critical. Water, water, water. These new seedlings, the roots are so short. Soon as that top layer dries out, that seed is going to start to dry out. So in order to get good germination with low humidity, like a day like today, it was 23% humidity here in Lexington, you're going to have to go out and water that 3 to 4 times a day. But as we get later, the days are getting shorter. You can start thinking maybe water it in the morning, water in the evening. You can use straw to help with that moisture management, or you can use other types of growth blankets that are going to help keep that moisture down to extend the periods between watering. But I would say be careful with the straw. If at all possible, get a weed-free straw, which you can buy. As you can see in the picture here on the right, they didn't get great establishment. Probably were depending on Mother Nature to water this seed. And it is full of actually wheat popping up from the straw blanket that they placed on top of it. So moisture is crucially important during those first few weeks of establishment, but just be aware of some of the pitfalls of the straw. Fertilizing the lawn, we have that soil test that you can look back at there. And once you have those seeds up, roots coming down, we want to apply approximately 1 pound of nitrogen and then potassium and phosphorus, just based upon if your soil test requires it. When we spread across that lawn, Just like our seeding, we want to go in multiple directions. The person here on the right who fertilized this lawn looks like they had a drop spreader and made passes. They just weren't quite close enough. So very, very green grass, the fertilizer worked, and it worked where they applied it. So use a broadcast spreader and go in multiple directions to get a more uniform spread of that fertilizer. And just be careful if it is hot, if there's moisture on the leaves, you want to be sure to wash that in right away, or consider using a slow release fertilizer that will reduce burn potential on those sensitive new seedlings. Misconception often is that you need to let that new lawn get very, very tall. Actually, just as soon as it gets to the height that you want it to be, go ahead and start mowing that lawn. You want to have the blades very, very sharp. Those new seedlings, you don't want to pull them out of the ground, but let that ground dry down enough that you can get on it. Be really cautious with turning, especially if you're on a riding lawnmower, and don't leave clumps in the grass. Go back and blow those out. But just as soon as the grass, is about a third taller than what you want it to be, it's okay to go ahead and start mowing it. And don't be too concerned if the grass is, laying over like it is in this picture. This lawn probably got a little bit too tall before they mowed it, but those are young seedlings. They're going to mature. They're going to thicken up over time. And actually mowing is going to help produce more tillering to spread that grass across the lawn to help densen it up. So we want to, with our new lawn, now that you've done all that hard work, try the best you can to keep traffic down to a minimum with animals, kids, lawnmowers. We want to mow frequently, but with caution. And as we establish those plants after we start mowing them, we want to reduce the watering each week. And then do not apply any herbicides until you have mowed the grass at least 3 times. And after that, you can enjoy your new lawn.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Sunshine Gardening Podcast. We want to thank Kenneth Clayton for sharing his valuable insights during our home lawn improvement series. If you've tried any of the tips that were mentioned or have any new experiences to share, we'd love to hear from you. We have created an evaluation survey for you to share your thoughts and experiences with us. Your feedback is what helps us improve and create content that is most beneficial to you. So to check out and complete the evaluation survey, make sure to see the show notes listed for episode 37 over on the blog at warrencountyagriculture.com. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, we would be incredibly grateful if you could spend the time and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your review helps us connect with more people and provide valuable feedback for improvement. Also, feel free to reach out if you have any other feedback or suggestions for future episodes. Remember to subscribe to the Sunshine Gardening Podcast for more gardening insights, and join us next time as we explore new ways to cultivate the garden of your dreams. Until then, happy gardening.
Thanks for listening to the Sunshine Gardening Podcast with Kristen Hildebrand. If you enjoyed today's content, make sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts to catch future segments of the Sunshine Gardening Podcast. Gardeners, keep on digging and learning more about gardening so the sun shines brighter over your Kentucky garden. The Sunshine Gardening Podcasts with Kristen Hildebrand is a production of the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service.